Heat some olive oil in a wide, heavy bottom pot over medium heat. While that's heating up, peel and cut 3 small onions into inch-sized pieces. White or yellow onions are preferable over red onions for this recipe. Add the onions to the heated olive oil and saute. Peel the outer layers of 2 medium-sized fennels until you get to the middle core. Cut them in half and reserve them for serving with the finished dish later. Break down the outer layers of the fennel, together with the ferns and stalks, into inch-sized pieces and add them to saute with the onions. Then do the same with 3 to 4 stalks of celery, also adding them to saute with the onions and the fennel. To that, we'll add 3 small carrots. First, peel the carrots and break them down into inch-sized pieces and add the carrots to saute. While the aromatics are sauteing, add a teaspoon of fennel seeds, a tablespoon of sea salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground saffron. Using a strong pair of kitchen shears, break down about 1 kilogram of fish carcasses into small pieces and add them to the aromatics. Ensure that your fish carcasses are fresh, otherwise you end up with a fishy tasting bouillabaisse. Then add a half bottle of dry white wine. Bring the wine to a boil and allow it to reduce by about half. In the meantime, cut 8 medium-sized tomatoes into rough chunks, removing the eyes in the process. Once the wines have reduced sufficiently, add the tomatoes to the pot and bring it up to a boil. It is the tomatoes together with the carrots that give the bouillabaisse its reddish-orange color. Then, add enough fish stock to cover all the ingredients and bring it up to a boil. There's a link to a video I previously made on how to make fish stock on the top right corner. I will also add the link to the video in the description below. Once it starts to boil, reduce it to a simmer and allow it to simmer for about 30 minutes. To make the rouille, put an egg yolk with 2 cloves of peeled garlic into a blender and add a 1/4 teaspoon of ground saffron that has been steeped in a tablespoon of hot water. Also, add a tablespoon of Dijon Mustard and a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. If you prefer to keep the dish gluten-free, add the flesh of a cooked and peeled potato as shown here. Alternatively, you can use white bread instead of the potato. Then, add a half teaspoon of salt and give it a quick blend to emulsify before removing it from the blender and reserving it for later use. For the full recipe, do check the description below. I like serving bouillabaisse with rustic style croutons, so I tend to break up a country style loaf into chunks and spread the rouille over the top before baking them in an oven preheated to 200 degrees Celsius for about 7 to 10 minutes. After the soup has been simmering for about 30 minutes, you have 2 options. One option is to blend the soup into a bisque like I'm doing here, or you can just strain it and use the broth. Personally, I prefer it blended as that adds a lot more body and flavor to the final taste. Once blended, it is best to strain it twice. The first strain is to remove the bulk of sediments from the blended fish carcasses and aromatics, and the second strain is to give the bouillabaisse a bit more refinement and a better palate sensation. Boil the fennel core that was reserved earlier in some bouillabaisse. Once the fennel is tender, which usually takes about 3 to 5 minutes, add the seafood, starting with those that take the longest to cook. In this case, I'm adding the head-on shrimps first, followed by a halibut fillet, and finally the clams and the mussels. Remove the croutons from the oven and arrange them nicely with a garnish of freshly chopped parsley for some color. Once the soup comes up to a simmer and all the shellfish have opened, turn off the heat and arrange the seafood nicely onto a soup plate before ladling the bouillabaisse over the seafood and garnish with more fresh parsley. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers!